Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When two fake HOA enforcers showed up at my warehouse gate, I thought it was a prank. Turns out it was the opening act of a suburban war led by a power-hungry Karen who didn't know where her authority ended and where my electrified fence began. My name's Rick Nolan. I'm 41, single by choice, and I own a private commercial warehouse that sits on the industrial fringe of a growing city in the Midwest. Nothing fancy. Just steel walls, concrete floors, and the sweet smell of grease and electrical solder lingering in the air. It's where I fix machinery, restore tools, and store equipment for construction crews who trust me more than their own garages. It's honest work, the kind that leaves your hands black and your conscience clean. I've had this place for 5 years, and in all that time, I've never had a problem until they moved in. Right past the west fence line lies Willow Crest Community, the kind of neighborhood that looks like it was designed in a computer simulation by someone who'd never been outside. Every house has the same muted beige siding, 3-car garage, and a decorative tree in the front yard that looks like it came with the mortgage. It's the kind of place where the biggest crisis of the week is someone's mailbox being an inch too tall. Naturally, they have an HOA. And naturally, it's run by a woman named Karen Hilton to be precise. Mid-50s, sharp bob haircut, always in crisp pastel blouses like she's about to lecture a PTA meeting on moral decay. She's the president of the Willow Crest HOA, and I swear she thinks she's the sheriff of the entire zip code. I've seen her patrol the sidewalks like she's got a badge under that name tag. She doesn't wave. She scans, like a drone in pearls. Now let's get one thing straight. My property is not part of their HOA. I did my homework before I bought the place. Zoned commercial, no association fees, no arbitrary rules about the color of my trash cans. Still, Karen never quite grasped that boundary. Over the years, I'd hear whispers from contractors who'd drop by. Hey, that lady across the street keeps asking what we're doing here. Or, that HOA lady said your place makes the neighborhood look industrial. No kidding, it's a warehouse. But I never expected it to escalate. I figured if I stayed quiet and kept my gates closed, she'd eventually tire of pretending my business was some sort of blight on her utopia. Turns out, I underestimated just how far people like Karen are willing to go to control what they don't own. And when I say control, I mean intrude. Everything blew up on a Tuesday morning. I pulled in early to get a head start on a rewiring job. The fog was still lifting off the pavement when I saw them. 2 men in black uniforms standing at my gate, arms crossed, sunglasses on, radiating the kind of fake authority you usually see at mall security kiosks. The bold white letters across their chests read, Willow Crest HOA Enforcement. I actually laughed out loud. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last normal morning I'd have for a long while. They stood like sentinels at the gate. 2 thick-set guys in pitch-black uniforms, arms folded, steel-toed boots planted like they were guarding the Pentagon. Bold letters across their chest read, Willow Crest HOA Enforcement. And for a split second, I thought they were actors in some low-budget dystopian film. But no, these weren't extras. They were real. And they were here, on my property. One of them stepped forward, holding a clipboard like it was a warrant. We're conducting an inspection, he said flatly. We've received reports of unsafe and potentially non-compliant activity on these premises. I blinked. From who? Your imaginary jurisdiction. This isn't Willow Crest. This is private commercial land. Zoned, permitted, insured. Try again. The guy didn't flinch. We've been authorized by the Willow Crest HOA to investigate structures and activities that may pose aesthetic or environmental risks to the community. Aesthetic, I scoffed. You're upset because a warehouse isn't pretty enough for your beige paradise. That's when the other guy chimed in, voice just as robotic. You're required to let us in. If you refuse, the HOA will escalate to the city. I nearly laughed, but my patience had thinned to a razor's edge. You take one more step toward that gate, and I'll have the police here faster than you can say zoning violation. Now, let's rewind. What exactly was their problem with me? Simple. My warehouse. Or, as Karen called it in her HOA newsletter, the rusty eyesore polluting our perimeter. Willow Crest was built after my property had already been zoned and in operation. But Karen? She moved in 2 years ago and made it her mission to restore the visual integrity of the community. According to her, my building disrupted the harmony of the residential vista and lowered home values by its very presence. What she really meant was, she hated seeing something real. My warehouse is industrial, it's functional. I've got ventilation ducts, stacked pallets, the occasional forklift parked near the loading bay. It's a working man's place. And for a person like Karen, who judges life by the color of hydrangeas and HOA-approved shutters, my warehouse was a monstrosity, a blight on her Stepford fantasy. She started by sending letters, polite at first. Mr. Nolan, the residents of Willow Crest would appreciate it if you could consider repainting your warehouse exterior to a more neutral tone, then more aggressive. Your operation is visible from the west cul-de-sac and is in violation of our community's visual standards. Except, I wasn't part of her community. She didn't care. I wasn't playing by her rules, so she rewrote them in her mind. Then she convinced enough of her HOA board to treat my warehouse like some rogue invader on their border. She whipped up a campaign spreading rumors that I was storing hazardous materials, that strange people came and went, and that children nearby felt unsafe. All lies, all fabricated. But in a neighborhood where a misplaced trash can could spark a town hall meeting, Karen's paranoia found fertile ground. So now, here we were, two fake enforcers at my gate, trying to strong-arm their way in under the guise of an inspection. I watched one of them subtly reach for the latch on my gate, the latch connected to a lock I installed. Big mistake. The moment his hand touched metal, my security system chirped. A recorded voice rang out from the intercom. Warning, unauthorized access will be reported. They froze. I smiled, stepped back, and pulled out my phone. Smile for the cameras, gentlemen. You just turned HOA meddling into a criminal trespass. One of them muttered something under his breath and turned to leave. The other lingered, puffed his chest, then gave up when he saw I wasn't bluffing. They trudged off like kids caught stealing lunch money. But I knew this wasn't over, not with Karen. She had tried diplomacy, then manipulation, and now intimidation. All because my warehouse didn't fit her color-coordinated catalog of suburban bliss. But if she thought I'd roll over like some spineless HOA minion, she was about to get the shock of her life. I never thought I'd be the type of guy who'd say, "Let's take this to court," with a grin on his face. But damn, it felt good. After the stunt with the fake HOA enforcers, I wasn't just mad. I was done. I called my attorney, James Linley, a no-nonsense litigation specialist who practically sleeps in a three-piece suit. I sent him the footage from my security cameras, the gate latch attempt, the uniforms, the smug entitlement. He didn't even finish watching before he said, "Yep, we're suing. We hit them hard. Unlawful attempted entry, harassment, defamation, tortious interference with business operations, distribution of falsified HOA documents." It was a legal buffet, and we were serving it with garnish. But I wasn't content to let the law work in silence. Oh no. I sent a complaint to the City Zoning Commission detailing how the Willow Crest HOA had impersonated regulatory authority. I filed a grievance with the state HOA regulatory board citing Karen's abuse of power. And just for flavor, I dropped the inspection footage on a local Facebook group for small business owners. Within 48 hours, it had over 12,000 views. One comment read, "Looks like the HOA got lost on their way to actual relevance." Then came court. The hearing was held in a stately building downtown with pillars that looked like they were carved out of HOA-approved marble. Karen showed up in a pale pink pantsuit, flanked by two HOA board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I recognized one of them from the video. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Karen strutted in like it was prom night, and she'd already won queen. She gave me a tight-lipped smile, the kind that says, "I'm going to bury you politely." Bad day to bet against me. My lawyer opened with the footage. The room fell silent as the judge watched the so-called inspection. The part where one of the guys tripped and fell into a stack of scrap metal earned a visible wince from the bailiff. When the judge saw the security alert blaring and me calmly telling them to leave, he raised his eyebrows and muttered, "Bold move. Karen's defense? Ridiculous." She claimed community safety and visual pollution, said she was acting in good faith on behalf of concerned residents, claimed that my warehouse, a perfectly legal, well-kept facility, was operating outside appropriate standards for neighboring zones. My lawyer responded by calmly producing zoning maps, permits, licensure, and a notarized letter from the city zoning office confirming I was not within the HOA's jurisdiction. Then he showed the court a copy of Karen's inspection notice, forged header, fake city seal, and a made-up statute number that didn't even exist. When asked to explain it, Karen said, "It was a draft for internal use." The judge's gavel slammed. Let me be very clear, Ms. Hilton. Internal drafts do not authorize you to impersonate regulatory officials, fabricate documents, or attempt entry onto private property. Your actions reflect a gross abuse of power. I didn't smile. Not yet. But it took effort. After a short recess, the judge returned with the ruling. The Willow Crest HOA was to pay $195,000 in compensatory and punitive damages, both for harm to my business and the defamation campaign Karen had spearheaded. A formal reprimand was issued to the HOA by the court, and all enforcement activity outside their boundaries was to cease immediately. But just before the gavel dropped again, Karen stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement." The courtroom tensed. I braced for a fake apology. Instead, she turned to me. "This isn't over, Mr. Nolan. You may think you've won, but I promise you, there are other ways to bring order to a neighborhood." The room went quiet. The judge stared at her like she'd just threatened to repaint his house in neon. "Ms. Hilton, I strongly advise you to reconsider your attitude." But I didn't flinch. I didn't need to, because right then I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The gavel had barely cooled when I realized I couldn't treat Karen's words as idle courtroom theatrics. "This isn't over, Mr. Nolan." It rang in my head like a warning siren, one of those lines you hear in movies right before someone lets the snake out of the bag. I wasn't dealing with a woman embarrassed into silence. No, Karen Hilton had just taken a blow to her power, and people like her. They don't go quiet. They plot. So I did what any man with half a brain and a fully functional paranoia circuit would do. I fortified. Not emotionally, literally. Within a week, I tore down my chain link perimeter and replaced it with a 12-foot steel privacy fence, reinforced at the base with motion detectors and floodlights every 10 feet. I installed a remote monitoring system with 360-degree night vision cameras, including one buried underground, just in case someone tried to go full mole person on me. A local contractor offered me a deal on electric fencing, not enough to fry a squirrel, but just enough to make someone really regret testing it. I agreed. A brand new sign was bolted to the main gate in industrial-grade typeface, "Private property, not in HOA. Trespassers will be electrocuted, recorded, and ridiculed in that order." The city confirmed everything I did was legal as long as I posted adequate warnings. I posted 14. Weeks passed. Things got quiet, suspiciously quiet. No strange cars parked outside, no notes on the gate. Karen's SUV hadn't been seen circling the block in days. I started to think maybe, just maybe, she'd accepted defeat. Then one morning, I pulled up to the warehouse and saw it. A patch of gravel near the eastern fence had been disturbed. Fresh, not natural erosion. Something or someone had dug. I froze, walked over, bent down. There were scrape marks, drag patterns, and there it was. A corner of my fence had a faint scuff, like it had been nudged from below. I didn't panic. I smiled. I opened the security app on my phone, loaded the overnight logs, and there it was. 2:41 a.m. Karen, hoodie up, flashlight between her teeth. Her husband Bill crawling behind her like a defeated golden retriever. They carried a small duffel bag, later revealed to contain wire cutters, a cordless drill, and, I kid you not, 3 cans of neon pink spray paint. Their mission? Apparently, to sabotage my property and graffiti HOA menace across the siding. What they didn't expect was the underground motion sensor the moment they crawled under the fence. The power clicked on. A low-voltage jolt zapped the metal they were touching. Bill jerked, rolled over, hit Karen in the ribs, and they both yelped. She dropped the flashlight, which blinked out in the dirt like the universe was laughing. I watched as they panicked, flailed in the dark, and retreated. Karen dragging Bill by the belt while one of the spray cans clattered uselessly behind them. The footage was glorious. I submitted it immediately. Within 24 hours, I had a second lawsuit in motion. Charges: attempted trespassing, property tampering, vandalism intent, and violation of a court injunction. The city wasn't laughing anymore. The judge wasn't amused either. Karen and her husband were convicted. The judge ruled their actions constituted criminal conspiracy and contempt of court. They were sentenced to 6 months probation, a combined $80,000 in fines, and, cherry on top, the HOA board voted to permanently ban both Hiltons from holding any future leadership positions. Karen's smirk, once her weapon of choice, was gone. She showed up to court in a beige sweater and no makeup, the closest she'd ever come to humility. Bill, meanwhile, looked like a man who'd seen the inside of a doghouse and hadn't left for days. Outside the courtroom, a reporter asked me how I felt. I just said, "Let this be a lesson. Don't bring a can of spray paint to a tech fight." Because in the end, justice didn't just knock, it rang the doorbell, signed for the delivery, and left a tip. You ever seen a perfectly manicured domino setup get knocked over by a single flick? That's exactly what it looked like after Karen lost her second case. Her fall wasn't a stumble, it was a televised collapse. Word spread faster than a gossip in a hair salon. The HOA board, already under scrutiny after the first lawsuit, now faced a tidal wave of backlash from within. Angry residents started showing up to meetings, waving copies of court transcripts and demanding accountability. Within a week, the entire Willowcrest board resigned or was voted out. An interim committee was installed, including a retired judge, a civil engineer, and, hilariously, a guy named Randy who once got fined for planting petunias without written permission. He ran on a No More Bull platform, won by a landslide. As for Karen, let's just say poetic justice doesn't quite cover it. She was forced to resign in disgrace not just from the HOA, but also from the local garden club, the neighborhood watch, and even the suburban women's book circle, after someone pointed out her idea of community involvement included electric shocks and spray paint. Her reputation plummeted faster than her home value. When the HOA voted to revoke her privileges and bar her from any future leadership, her smugness finally cracked. She gave one last passive-aggressive statement to the HOA's internal forum. Some people clearly don't understand the value of structured beauty and order. 2 weeks later, her house, the same pristine colonial with the obnoxiously perfect hedges, hit the market. But buyers weren't interested, not with her name tied to 2 lawsuits, multiple news articles, and a nickname in the neighborhood Facebook group, the HOA Warden. She had to sell below market, and even then, the buyer insisted she remove all her custom Karen-installed surveillance signs and donated her white picket fence to Habitat for Humanity, just to spite her. I heard she moved 2 towns over to a place without an HOA. Ironic, right? But she didn't go quietly into civilian life. Apparently, she tried to form a neighborhood excellence committee in her new subdivision, a voluntary group, mind you, but it died before it launched. The residents shut it down before the first flyer went out. Word had spread. Her name was synonymous with control, lawsuits, and spray paint. Last I heard, she took a job at a private storage facility, the kind with 24/7 access and absolutely zero say in what color your door should be. Bill, her husband, now teaches online driver's ed and doesn't bring up the incident. Meanwhile, I got letters from 3 different Willowcrest residents apologizing, 2 of whom had supported Karen during her reign of pastel tyranny. One even brought me pie, cherry. More importantly, the city issued a public clarification. HOAs do not and cannot exert control beyond their recorded boundaries. It was small, official, and framed now in my office like a diploma. The best part? Business boomed. Contractors, electricians, and engineers from all over started calling me the guy who beat the HOA. We even made custom t-shirts with that slogan. Sold out in a week. I didn't just win. I redecorated the scoreboard. Justice tastes best with barbecue sauce. A few months after the courtroom gavel slammed shut on Karen's delusions of control, the city was quieter. The signs of her legacy, the passive-aggressive emails, the HOA fines for overly enthusiastic seasonal decor, the drone patrols she once proposed, were fading into memory. Willowcrest was rebuilding, slowly. A new, reasonable interim HOA board had been put in place, made up of people who actually cared more about neighbors than lawn symmetry. Even they started joking that HOA now stood for humbled, overhauled, and apologetic. But I wasn't quite done. See, after all the lawsuits, the court dates, the property sabotage, and yes, the electrical fencing, I realized something. We'd earned a celebration. A good one. Not a polite nod at the city council or a thank you email thread. A real blowout. One that would live in the local legend. And so was born. First annual HOA Independence Day. Subtitle: Because freedom shouldn't come with dues. I printed flyers and passed them around town. I even mailed one anonymously to Karen's forwarding address. Petty? Absolutely. Worth it? You have no idea. On the day of the event, my warehouse was transformed. We rolled up the bay doors, cleared out the storage lot, laid down wooden pallets for benches, strung lights between the fence posts, and brought in a food truck. Smoky Rick's Pit and Grill, which was not mine despite the name. I like to think of it as destiny. There were grills, coolers, cornhole tournaments, a dunk tank featuring a cardboard cutout of Karen, and music blasting from speakers mounted on the loading dock. Someone even brought a karaoke machine, and by sundown, a retired librarian was belting out "We're Not Gonna Take It," like she'd waited her whole life for the moment. Neighbors came, not just from Willow Crest, but from surrounding communities. Families, contractors I'd worked with. That guy who got fined for building a garden gnome village. He brought cupcakes shaped like eviction notices. A true artist. And, for once, nobody cared about HOA-approved decor or standardized picnic baskets. People laughed without looking over their shoulders. Kids ran around with impunity. One group of teens even staged a reenactment of the Great Crawl attempt, wearing wigs, crawling under caution tape, and pretending to get zapped before throwing handfuls of glitter into the air. I nearly cried laughing. When the sun dipped low, I climbed on a crate and raised a glass. "This," I said, "is what freedom looks like. No forged documents, no HOA patrols, no pastel-clad tyranny. Just burgers, fireworks, and neighbors who don't send cease and desist letters over Halloween decorations." People cheered. Someone lit a Roman candle. A chant broke out. "No more Karen! No more Karen!" And then, with perfect timing, I flicked the switch and lit up my newest installation above the warehouse doors, a glowing neon sign in patriotic red, white, and electric blue. "Property protected. Proudly hoe-free." The crowd roared again. I swear someone started singing the national anthem over the beat of Lynyrd Skynyrd. Later that night, I slipped away to the edge of the lot. I sat alone for a moment on a crate by the fence, the kind of peaceful silence that only comes after chaos. In my hand was a paper plate of ribs. Behind me, the monitors showed nothing but calm. No threats, no Karens. I looked up at the wall of the warehouse where I'd mounted my favorite war trophy, a still frame from the security footage. Karen and her husband mid-crawl, eyes wide, limbs flailing, one can of neon spray paint rolling away into the darkness. Beneath it was a brass plaque. "Independence secured. Trespassers will be shocked, filmed, and featured." Just above it, a framed copy of the court ruling. Right next to it, a photo of that cherry pie one neighbor brought me as an apology. I took a long breath. The smell of smoke and freedom still lingered in the air. "To peace. Petty victories and perfectly cooked ribs," I whispered. And behind me, the party raged on. A block of neighbors laughing, singing, living like a real community at last. Justice had been served, with extra sauce.